Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to SCMPro Forum's Roundtable focusing on pharmaceutical industry. We welcome you all today for the discussion on digital acceleration of supply chains. I would like to thank all our speakers for being there today and joining the discussion. I would also like to thank SAP for supporting the roundtable and all our listeners for being there. Let me quickly go ahead and introduce you to our speakers today, and I would request them to join on the stage. We have Niraj, Director, Head Supply Chain Analytics at Cipla; Riju Verma, Head Supply Chain at Hetro Drugs; Ajay Swaroop, Head Supply Chain Operations Planning at Strides; Vickram, Head of Planning Supply Chain Management at Ipca Labs; Sreenivas, Global Head of Supply Chain at Sun Pharma; Anchal, Director, Global Center of Excellence, SAP India; and Dr. Rakesh Singh, Chairman from Institute of Supply Chain Management. Thank you, and we welcome you all. And I would request Dr. Singh to kindly lead the discussion ahead. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for this miscommunication. I think we thought it was at 3 o'clock. And thank you for joining us in time. This discussion focuses on digital acceleration of supply chains, primarily with a focus on supply chain planning. And as we have seen during the disruption, COVID-19 disruption, the supply chain planning has been, taken a hit. And there are a lot of elements that has been exposed in supply chain planning. The vulnerability of supply chain planning have come to the fore, though we have been saying that supply chain planning has taken a back seat, but has it? And with this view in mind, we thought of looking at the complete, right from the demand side to the supply chain side, and taking it forward to discuss what role today can technology play in that sense. So without wasting much time, I will ask Mr. Sreenivas Rao Nandigam from Sun Pharmaceuticals to start with letting us know what are the critical dimensions of supply chain planning that have that has been exposed by the disruption and the pandemic, and what are the critical areas that needs to be taken into account while planning for the supply chain in future. Sreenivas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Singh. Am I audible?
Yeah.
All right. So, first of all, it's a great pleasure again to be back on the platform with you, Dr. Singh, and other colleagues from various people within the pharma industry. During the COVID-19 period, in fact, one of the things which has actually jolted everybody is about continuity of supply because of this kind of a disruption. Although pharma was actually classified as an essential service, and we were allowed to keep our operations going, but not many of the factories, not many of the industries, and not many of the factories were being able to continue operations. Yeah. Now, one of the supply chain planning things which actually completely got out of gear, in my personal opinion, here is the inventory situation for various companies. Yeah. Pre-COVID period, everybody used to think just-in-time was the most fashionable thing to have. And post-COVID period, a lot of people are actually questioning the complete just-in-time. Yeah. While pharma industry per se has always operated with a little higher inventories on hand as compared to, let's say, the auto industry or the FMCG, which is much closer to the pharma kind of a supply chain. But even then, what has happened is that there were a lot of people who were trying to actually load their pantries in terms of not wanting to go to the chemist very often, and therefore instead of getting a 15-day supply, they would want to buy, let's say, 1 month supplies, and so on and so forth. So inventories across the supply chain nodes, redefining those inventories for actually such kinds of events has become one of the important things which has been a big learning for many of us. Yeah. Just to give you an example, the case in point for, let's say, Sun, we used to operate with inventories of approximately 70 days of finished goods on hand across all nodes put together. Now, during the COVID period, because of the disruption, and that 70 is an average, obviously, yes, there are some SKUs which are like 20 days, some SKUs which are 100 days. Yeah. Now, during the period, we consciously took a call and we said that, we would rather prefer to have little extra inventory so that the patients, doctors, and everybody are actually not facing any problem in terms of the availability of medicines. And business, of course, does not suffer. Yeah. Is this something which will continue forever? No. But is this something which will have some stick-on effect? For sure, yes. What I mean is that, if we have increased our inventories from, let's say, a 70 to a 90 days because of the COVID, ultimately the pendulum will swing back to the center and say that, let's say, we will let us settle down at, let's say, a number of 80 days. I'm just throwing this number for the sake of representation. All I'm trying to say is that at least with Sun and many of the other companies also, they have realized that, keeping a little bit of inventories, especially when you have reasonably good margins on hand, is not a liability, but it is actually an asset. So that is one of the big things which has been a learning for us during COVID period. There are many more, but I would like to kind of take a pause here and actually pass it back to the panelist or Dr. Singh. Yeah.
Thank you, Sreenivas. And let me take the question forward to Niraj from Cipla. Niraj, what do you think are the major supply chain issues in terms of planning? As you come from a background of data and analytics, can you give us that focus in terms of looking at the transition? Because a lot of us have been saying that planning is dead, and there's a new era for planning. There's a more resilient planning. So what does it mean, and how is the old system changing, or what are the critical vulnerability of the old system that should be taken care of so that we can move into a more resilient planning system?
So I will give certain dimensions. So obviously, no one was prepared for such a jolt, right? Specifically, this is probably once in 100 years. I don't think any companies or any institution can plan for it, right? So I think the organizations have to become more and more resilient. But one dimension which I think probably is going to play a key role, right? How do so let us leave aside the short-term disruption which has happened, right? Sudden lockdown created shortages across a number of demand points, number of SKUs across industries. But I think one important element probably we have to think how quickly we get the demand signals, right? From the point of sales, right? It could be stores, it could be translated back to the organizations who are planning for it, right? So I think the traditional planning system has always been long term, right? You plan for 12 months, 24 months, you plan for long term horizon, you plan for materials, and that's a long term forecast, right? And I'm sure in this period you may have seen that forecast accuracy must have gone for toss, right, across organizations. At least in that period of time, I think in certain categories of drugs, in certain categories of products, the forecast accuracy must have gone for toss. So I don't think that kind of horizon, the long-term view, plan for materials, and then you plan the production accordingly, that probably going to change, right? I think the organizations have to start relying more and more how to get those demand signals. And sophisticated algorithms are already available. I mean, we could take an example. If take an example of the e-commerce channels, right? I think they were able to manage this much better than any other traditional companies were there. Some of the examples which I actually personally see when I talk to my colleagues in the industry, in other geographies, certain sectors, certain industries were able to manage it differently than others. And I think the advancement of technology, machine learning algorithms has proven very successful to manage those demand signal, which is coming out of from the point of sale application, which could be used to plan your short term and long term. That's what my view is. And I'm sure from an architecture point of view, we have enough digital technologies available. So there is a sophisticated algorithms which can actually predict, right, the demand signal coming out, even though with certain level of accuracy. The technology is available which can take those signals, pass it back to the processing plant. So I think there we have to see the resilience coming in from the demand collaboration point of view. That's my view.
Thank you, Niraj. Ajay, what are your viewpoints on the same? From a larger supply chain planning, what are the critical areas that needs to be addressed? We saw inventory as one of the major areas. Obviously, inventory is a reduced form of supply chain parameters which everybody has to deal with, and Sreenivas brought about a big chunk of the idea that was used, and that was the only way to go about. Or Niraj talked about algorithm already available, and we can get the trends and the patterns of the demand. We can sense the demand and look at it. What are your thought process on that?
Yeah. So first of all, good afternoon, Rakesh, and good afternoon to all the panelists. Good afternoon to the audience. Thank you for inviting me for this discussion, which I think is one of the most apt topics for the times that we are in. It was early 2020 when I think I suddenly realized that the term VUCA has more relevance than ever before. As the months progressed in 2020, this hunch of mine has turned more into a reality, and probably mankind has never witnessed such an unprecedented time, at least in the lives of all the living beings today. It may have been in a different era, but definitely in our era, it's probably the first time. And what has this VUCA environment done? From a pharmaceutical industry standpoint, supplier reliability has suffered. In-house production has been challenged. Logistics unavailability, port congestions have increased. And on top of it, the demand has been more variable than ever. I mean, you're basically talking about the overall supply chain end to end going through a jolt. And not just that, I mean, the increases in raw material prices, packing material cost, freight cost have dropped, they have increased, have dropped the margins, thus putting considerable pressure on all the supply chain to be more efficient and productive with very little, areas of I would say solutions or getting resolutions. And on top of it, be it healthcare workers, be it the employees of our industry, channel partners, pharmacies, they all had to continue, ensure continuity of business for larger interests of humanity first, I would say, before even business, while being safe themselves and incommunicable to the disease. I mean, logically, I think, the only answer that was left was to accelerate the digitization of every element of supply chain. So now, having said that, the context of this whole digitization is so apt that every element. I'll probably start off with demand planning. We touched base. I mean, Niraj touched base upon the demand planning. I mean, we have these algorithms which are machine learning algorithms available for us. But do we think that a typical regression model is an effective model today? I doubt, because a typical regression model works on historical data of the recent past and then projects out or extrapolates the future demand, and this is unprecedented. This unprecedented demand is not seeing any demand whatsoever. Certain molecules had such a radical surge in demand, and others had such a drastic drop. What could a typical regression model do for that? Yes, when it comes to machine learning, we had to probably, and I'm sure Niraj and the a lot of data analysts and data scientists would have probably gone into different kind of models which exist under machine learning, like random forest. I don't know if that could have been a better tool to do justice to such a demand, which could have brought in more complex decision making while making a demand plan for an organization for a particular molecule. Those could be some of the solutions that would have been or that are currently being used by some supply chain planners who have deemed fit to use such kind of solutions. That's about demand planning. Come to supply planning. I believe that supply planning, the supply reliability, Srini focused upon having more inventories as a resolution to lower supply reliabilities, which was evident. What I felt is probably the role of integrated business plannings, SNOPs, have become a lot more significant today in today's age as a resolution to supplier reliability, and using tools to integrate not just the back end vertical of our supply chains, but even the forward, to understand end to end or getting signals to reduce the bullwhip effect what has been caused by COVID. So these are some thoughts that I just want to put across as an introductory to this panel, and I think the other panelists can maybe put forward their viewpoints across this.
All right. Thank you, Ajay, for those two important points in the process of demand planning. Let me pass on the question to Riju Verma. Riju, what are your views on supply chain planning? The transition between more normal supply chains to a more resilient supply chain for the new normal. What are the critical areas of challenge that you see? We can't hear you, Riju.
Yeah, hello. Okay. Am I audible now? Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, doctor, and good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to our viewers. So, at Hetro, doctor, what now, if I say the overall experience that has been that we use the normal traditional planning process of capturing quarterly demand, annual demand, and then the 4-month rolling plan. But what we saw this pandemic brought was that basically because of the category of products that we are in, and we are leaders in ARVs, we are a big player in remdesivir, and now we are partnered with Sputnik for the vaccine rollout also. So what this COVID gave us certain setbacks in terms of raw material supply chain disruption from China. The port congestion that Ajay mentioned, we also suffered. But because of the certain inventory norms that we keep, we could, I would say, very proudly say that last, say, from the current year, April to now onwards, we have been bang on our sales and in terms of meeting our customer demand globally. So my take of last 6-7 months of supply chain demand and both the demand planning and the supply chain planning is that the success why Hetro had was that we had certain inventory norms plus the backward integration that this company has. As a long site, we have our backward integration of intermediates in many cases. So I think so going forward, one formula wouldn't fit a business like Hetro in a very standard form. You have certain category of products where a normal demand planning cycle would roll out. you have the typical SNOP cycle, but the business opportunities to some pharma companies that the pandemic opportunity has given requires, to our experiences, more than a system, is the flexibility with which the organization can move in terms of arranging its material, ramping up its production, and shipping out its products to the requisite customers. And but now, yes, with this, so we had the standard products going on, and then we had these huge business opportunities, which and now you may call it one sense business opportunities. Other side is the requirement of mankind. So we have now rolled out more than 7 lakh doses of remdesivir within India itself, and global markets is being served. So when these business opportunities came, the flexibility which our company has shown by way of arranging the raw materials, ramping up the production and the supplies, rightly, freight costs have gone up. We have to, in certain cases, use charter flights to ship out our products. But overall, we came out very strongly serving the mankind in terms of last 7 to 8 months. And but yes, at Hetro we do have SAP, doctor, but we are now looking at, now that was the standard norm, was one experience that we had. Last 9 months has given us something very different, where luckily we succeeded. Now a mix of both these have to be discussed at the CXO level, and then we ourselves are then looking at the need of what kind of a software system we could implement, roll out internally, or have it rolled out through an external agency that could help us manage both these kind of scenarios, the regular business supply chain and the critical opportunities that the company gets time to time, or the critical human service requirements that come up globally.
Thank you, Riju, I think, for bringing those points. Traditionally, if you compare pharma company in terms of number of days of inventory, manufacturing lead time, obsolescence as a percentage of sales, and cash-to-cash cycle in terms of days, which could be good indicator of what we can call it as supply chain planning, you find that pharma companies actually compare very poorly with FMCGs. Maybe there are questions on this basis of comparison, but for its sake of looking at planning as more appropriate and effective and successful tool, if you make this comparison, it's astonishing. If you look at some of the ENY reports, Deloitte reports, and McKinsey report combined, you find that pharma inventory days are 258 days, FMCG is 72, manufacturing lead time is 150 days. For FMCG, it is 5 to 6 days. Obsolescence is 3% of the sales, and for FMCG, it's 0.05. And if you look at cash-to-cash cycle, also it's quite high on average. You look at automobiles, it's 94 days, chemical is 77, and pharmaceuticals, it says, is around 85 to 243 days, depending upon which company you're talking about. So the average can be a very. This gives us an indication that there is a lot of scope that pharmaceutical companies would have in terms of supply chain planning, COVID or no COVID, because these are reports,
so Dr. Rakesh,
before the COVID.
Yeah,
I'll
Dr.
come back.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Yeah. I love the question. If you finish the question, I would like to take this question.
All right, but what I thought, Sreenivas, I'll give it to Vickram and then we'll pass it on to you.
Sure.
Yeah, so Vickram, you have been heading demand planning and supply planning in different companies in pharma. What are your take on that? What really is the major reason for this metrics differences when supply chain matters,
So, Dr. Rakesh, so first of all, very good afternoon to all my co-panelists and to all the listeners on this forum. Very rightly said, I'm not going to debate any of those numbers. In fact, I believe those are fairly accurate. It actually represents what pharma planning supply chain has been. You know, we have been laggards in terms of adopting new technology, in terms of looking at new processes and redefining the, re-engineering our processes. So I'm actually not very surprised looking at, that we are lagging in terms of, days of sales or cash to cash cycles when you compare it to, supply chain leaders in terms of adoption of new technology like automobile and FMCG. So, my take on this is, there are a couple of things that, are very different for pharma. One, it being very regulated, highly regulated. Probably we are one of the top three, highly regulated industries, probably after aviation and nuclear. If you have to talk about a regulated industry, it's pharma. So, and it's not an excuse that, I'm trying to make out over here. But that definitely slows down the speed at which we can make changes. That definitely makes our supply chain a little slower in terms of which vendors we can choose from. So if you look at the entire end-to-end supply chain, right from demand sensing, consensus, doing a forecasting, making into, a sensible number, which you can call as your demand planning number, blowing it into your supply planning, production planning, and then finally distribution, So the entire chain, every node which I've talked about is controlled, it's monitored, it's the switching of, your vendors, the switching of suppliers is not very convenient and easy. I mean, it's both time taking, it's costly, it involves money and time both. So that I think is one of the key reasons why pharma supply chains have been, planning per se has been slow. The other thing which I feel, as an industry, we've been, we've had, double digits growth for, almost 2 decades now. Once the generic pharma industry opened up, we've been sitting on a lot of, cushion, so to speak. I mean, the real need to change, like we say, need is the innovation. I mean, when there's a need, you innovate, right? So generally in the industry, what I've seen, I've been here for almost a decade plus now. What I've seen is now the margins are shrinking, definitely with increased competition. Markets like US completely opened up. We have multiple players, jostling for space in the world's largest pharmaceutical market. Japan, which is the second largest probably by value pharmaceutical market, is opening up. China is opening up. So, the newer revenues are coming up. But if you look at US, Europe, few companies have had a very comfortable cushion, so to speak, in terms of margins. And there was no real, push to innovate, so to speak. Whatever was happening probably for the last 2 odd decades, people were very comfortable. But now people have started waking up to the fact that, the margins are shrinking with disruptions like what we have faced now. And this is probably 2020. Corona was one of the disruptions. But if you look at the last 3-4 years, there was, a US-China trade war, which led to an imbalance. There was, supply disruptions from China for the last couple of years. There was a green pollution, check where the entire chemical belt in China was put to a standstill. So we've had these kinds of disruptions, and supply chain executives in pharma are now waking up to the fact that we cannot be, just very comfortable with the way our supply chains are right now. We need to look at, how we can innovate, right from, your consensus planning, how we can do better demand sensing. Though I still feel the demand sensing part of it, for example, in markets like US, it's pretty standard. These are very matured pharmaceutical markets. So there's little margin for, improving your demand sensing and all. You have your set, supply channels, you have your distributor set. So that part of it is still taken care of. But yeah, new product launches, getting into new markets and capturing new customers is still a challenge. So all these factors in my mind, Dr. Singh, is is where we are in terms of supply chain planning when it comes to pharma. Yeah.
All right. Before I go to Anchal, hi Anchal, welcome. Sreenivas, if you want to take the question as
Yeah. So, I hear you loud and clear. Your question is a very simple question. Why are the metrics so poor in the pharma industry as compared to FMCG? Now, let me be very honest about it. My experience in FMCG has been much bigger than in pharma. And that is the reason why I was actually itching to answer your question. Okay. So there are good reasons.
I knew that.
Yeah. So there are good reasons why the metrics are not so good. Yeah. Now, when you go and actually buy a medicine in a pharmaceutical in a pharmacy, you look at the expiry date. You don't look at the manufacturing date. Legislation also doesn't ask you to put the manufacturing date. On the contrary, when you actually go and buy an FMCG product, whether it's a food or a non-food or whatever it is, household product, what is written is actually the manufacturing date. You look at the stock freshness. Yeah, you don't want to look at when you are buying a tomato ketchup, whether it is close to expiry or whether it is close, close to expiry. You want to look at how close is it to manufacturing, how fresh is it. So the whole concept of a stock freshness does not exist in the minds of a patient or a consumer, because a medicine is not to relish the product. A medicine is to actually kill whatever disease which you have, and as long as it is effective, therefore the effectiveness date is actually more important for the patient, for the everybody in the value chain. So that's one of the reasons why perhaps let's say the inventory cycles, the whole 9 yards, everything works on a backward direction rather than going forward direction. That's one reason. The other thing which I wanted to also tell you is, Dr. Rakesh, these numbers which you compare, actually the wide range of numbers which you compare are actually from an innovator company to let's say a generic company, the 85 days to a 250 days. Innovator companies end up making a 90-95% gross margin. No FMCG company has that number. They do not mind actually having a inventory which is equivalent to 250 days and writing off 1 or 2% of their top line, because gross margins, if they are at 95% of the product, then you write off another 3%, you still end up at a gross margin of 92%. Yeah. Now the same is not the truth when you are actually selling either a toilet cleaner or let's say a household detergent. Yeah. So when you're running on a 8% margins. So these are two construct differences, structural differences in the industry, which has actually allowed the inefficiencies to creep in. Do they have a legitimate place and a legitimate position in the industry because of that particular construct? It cannot be forever, as Vickram just now mentioned. The margins are getting squeezed on one hand, therefore we will have to work upon actually improving them. And number two, what is happening is that a lot of retailers, especially in the Western world, are saying that we will not take a product which is got less than 1 year of shelf life or less than 2 years of shelf life or less than 75% of the shelf life and so on and so on. So therefore, the industry is evolving more towards the FMCG or the other industry, yeah, and it will come there, but it's a long way to go, yeah. But these are the two structural differences, in my personal opinion, which are there as a part of the industry.
No, perfect. I think those differences were very well known. That's why I added a caveat that comparison may not be so appropriate at this point, but the bottom line planning comparison is appropriate, saying that why can't we be more agile, because 3 to 5% of the whole value is lost in stockouts when there is a huge inventory lying in the process. We did some work for a pharma company and we found that the standard deviation was 300 and the mean was 225, meaning that the inventory in the system is amazingly high. And this is where, given the structural differences between the two companies, there are certain element of learning, because if you look at shelf life of even CPG companies, 3 months, the modern retailer is not going to keep the product after 1.5 months. Or if it is 4 weeks, after third week, it's out of sale. So there are a lot of danger and there are a lot of comparisons that come in. And I think this is where planning becomes very critical. Anchal, welcome. What are your initial views on supply chain planning, and what do you see from a technology perspective as a gap? Or a solution perspective, if I want to make it simpler.
Yeah. So thanks. Glad to join the esteemed forum here. The key is simplicity here. Vickram, you mentioned need is innovation, right? So when we are, as the market is evolving, as supply chains are evolving, as we are grappling through, pandemics like the one we are going through now, the whole point comes to, when it comes to enterprise solutions, it's all about decisions I need to take today about my business, decisions I need to take at a regular interval, and these factors change depending on the nature of business. Regular business, yes, maybe the monthly checks, calculations make sense, but as we are going through this pandemic, when there is so much of uncertainty, the whole point comes to what are the inputs I need for this decision making, on what frequency, what is the effort required to make those decisions. And I'm not just talking of algorithms. Algorithms are one part of it, and they are there, they can help you calculate. The key input also comes in terms of visibility, and this visibility is the knowledge that the channel partners have, it's the visibility that the field sales have, it's the visibility that the suppliers have, and across the supply chain. So this visibility which is required for decision making is not limited to the own organization, it extends into the supply chain partners, and the whole response, the resilience depends on how good is the information we are able to capture from all these parties. And this is from people, this is from systems. So where do I have this information which can help me take decision about how much I'm producing, how am I ordering, if a supplier is under risk, what is my plan B, and how fast I can act on it. So in this range, the first dimension I want to mention is gathering these inputs. Where algorithms may fail, the best latest information we can gather and digitize will help us get more responsive. So in addition to this input from the suppliers, the second part comes in is how easy it is, in a very simple way, because gone are the days of complicated systems or complicated, where you need advanced statisticians. Here we are talking of, we want people to provide information in the most simple way possible. We shouldn't have to train them. We want a simple information. It could be in terms of a commit from a contract manufacturer. The input could be in form of a channel partner who has a new information on e-commerce, how things are shaping up, and how easy it is for them. So the direction, how we see as a technology partner, is that we need both dimensions. One is how do we integrate with, extend the arm from supply chain into the supply network, that is bring all the parties together who can provide input. And on second dimension is how easy we can make it for people to use the systems, how we can create a unified view, because all of us would agree that when information resides in pockets, collating them, bringing it together, trying to validate it takes a lot of time. So these are the directions which I want to mention, where we are working on. Couple of our customers are already using it. In terms of planning application, bring all these inputs and then engage in the powerful algorithms, be it machine learning, be it supply calculations, in helping calculate what would be the best course of action going forward. So this is how, Dr. Singh, I see. For me, one thing that I'm passionate about is one, this, bringing in the supply chain part, and second is the simplicity part of it, that it shouldn't take long to be able to understand what's going on in order to be able to take decision based on this information.
I think that's very interesting, making it simple and bringing all the supply chain part. And I would add the third one as making it as broad as possible to capture all information. So I think that would make the supply chain, resilience a key theme for planning in the future. And also I see this as a very important area because in pharma, as Sreenivas or Vickram and even Ajay said, there is a lot of bullwhip effect. I think someone used the term bullwhip. Ajay used the term bullwhip. And primarily these are because of the network, the supply chain network is operating in its silo. The extra organization, not within the business, but extra organization is in silos too. And I think that creates a lot of what you call it as outcomes, which are essentially to protect themselves in the networks of supplies and matching demand. And I think, as I said, the standard deviation of 227 and the mean of 300, by any rule of the thumb, the inventory in the system would be amazingly high. If you are using any mathematical textbooks to understand inventory, you would be out of the, you'll be killed, and you may not realize. And keeping such a high inventory, was one reason why some of us became more resilient during the disruption period. But I think there are more to resilience than just to keeping inventory. And having brought this one round of the debate, I thought I'll just break them into demand planning and supply chain planning, and then the network imposed on the supply chain planning as to how do we go about as this thing. So let me start with demand planning.
Dr. Singh, if I may, just want to add one more point, which I think is very relevant to the discussion. See, pandemic and when the formulas and algorithms are not enough, one more important capability is, I don't know what is going to happen, but I have 2 or 3 hypotheses how market may shape up, how commits from suppliers will come in, and how will I balance this demand and supply, how will I decide. So in this situation, when historical data doesn't help, one the earlier points I mentioned was the input, right? There are algorithms, we can look at machine learning, but when it comes to uncertainties, in addition to being able to capture all the input in one single platform, the second important thing is to be able to do what if analysis. That is, I don't know what is for sure going to happen, but if market, for a certain product, for example, I'm introducing, it takes this shape, then I will respond it in this certain way. If volumes develop in a different way, this is my second hypothesis. Being able to have these scenarios, create a financial view of it, like how market may shape up and what does it mean to me in terms of my margins, and then being able to take a decision. I think this is also in terms of technology an important point. I continue to maintain simple is my favorite word. How can business simply create a scenario? In one of our conversations with one of the SAP IBP customers, I was asking them, okay, how has been your usage, what how you handle COVID, and I happened to ask, do you use what if planning? And the response I got was, what do you mean do you use? That's like bread and butter. That's the maximum feature we use, because it's easier for me to create a snapshot, create a scenario, and then present to management, these are the 3 or 4 parts, this is how we go. So rather than us talking of technology, I was glad to hear in this one-to-one conversation that one of the biggest use was not any particular algorithm or any particular feature, it was simply being able to create what if scenarios. So this is what I wanted to add into my response. I think it's a very critical and relevant point. Continue.
Yeah, it's a very relevant point, and this is where I was going to. Let me move to Vickram. And Vickram, a lot of us talked about demand sensing. I think the most simplest definition of demand sensing I got today from Anchal. Right now, when she has defined everything of the demand sensing in a very distinct. Are we really sensing demand the way we should, as he has defined it? Well, that's the amazing layman point of view when you talk about how are we really confusing between forecasting somewhere. Sometimes we say forecasting doesn't matter, so we take inputs and then we go by gut feeling. What is the demand sensing change that are required to be a very, very, very effective organization and have more granular and more effective plans rather than forecast, more plans? Because The idea is just forecasting can be one of the input into the demand planning process, not necessarily the input. And hence, all the criticism against forecasting can go for a rest if you start looking at demand sensing and demand signaling from the market in a better way. So what are your views on that? As a part of more structured demand planning in future, what is the role of demand sensing?
So yeah, I mean, absolutely, the entire chain, the chain of event in my mind, if you have to look at short term, medium term, or long term, I mean, forecast in my mind has to, take a role where, medium to long range planning can be based on my, broad forecast numbers and the projections that my, sales and marketing team takes. Probably more defined decisions about capacity, about taking up further enhancement in my production cycle in terms of greenfield projects or brownfield projects. That is where I see forecasting. In my mind, forecasting is not dead. We have to use it smartly. I mean, I think Ajay was mentioning about regression models being using their your past data and then bringing some numbers. Those numbers might not always be relevant. I mean, especially in situations like this, where you don't know what is going to hit your supply chain. I mean, whether you're going to have a supply disruption from the vendor end, or your customer is just going to stop their orders because they're in no position to take it. And even if both your supply and demand are there, you don't have a way to distribute your goods. During the COVID, we faced that challenge also. There was supply, there was demand, but I was not able to marry both of them because distribution and logistics gone missing. So having said that, yeah, forecast in my mind is going to play a more pivotal role in medium to long range planning, where I'm going to look at more decision in terms of how I'm going to look at my capacities, how I'm going to enhance my production line, etc. But for a closer mid to short range planning, demand sensing, the word we look at right now, I mean, point of sale data, I know in pharma might not always be possible, and looking at my manufacturing supply lead times, it might not always be relevant also. Looking at point of sales data, I would still want to look at the broader number of how my distributors are looking at selling their goods, do a little bit of ground analysis as to what my sales and marketing teams are looking at selling. And at the end of the day, when I look at demand sensing, I should be looking at how I'm going to convert that into my planning and look at converting my typical S&OP cycle, I mean, which in my mind should be looking at mid to long range planning and convert it into a S&OE, probably a sales and operation execution, where I look at what my numbers are coming through, try and squeeze my supply chain, the lead time, right from my raw material inventories to converting that into finished goods and to supplying it to my, supply nodes, wherever I need to distribute it. So how I can convert a typical S&OP cycle to a S&OE with the help of, tools, probably. I mean, IBP is something that we've been, talking about, but in my mind, demand sensing is not just going to look at how I'm going to manage my supply planning, but also my material planning. So that is where, probably a typical MRP process can be looked at from a demand driven MRP process, where I can try and reduce those inventories, of raw materials and APIs that I'm carrying, and squeeze that number of days also a little bit, so that I can be more reactive and responsive at the same time to the demand fluctuations that come through. That's my take, Doctor.
All right, I think that's a very overall approach.
That's a very good
concept of demand sensing. Yes. How do we really look at that particular aspect of it? Riju, yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so what I wanted to bring in the point, Doctor, is that within pharma, look at all these big companies, the Sun, Lupin, Cipla, all these companies, USV, all these companies, we need to have, I think, 2 or 3 different kind of planning scenarios. The domestic market is where your forecasting helps, your MRP helps, you have previous year's numbers with you, you have a complete history of the market, and we end up, sir, hitting 99, 99.5, 99.9% OTIF month on month, as far as the domestic market is concerned. Here, the inventory norms are also less. 30 days is maximum API that we may keep. We just keep around 15 days of packing material and excipients. So the domestic market handling and the forecasting and the planning process and the MRP running is one set of much simpler than the big size market that all these big Indian pharma companies have is the tender market. Here the challenge is that you know, you play with the, and these are almost $500 million, $400 million, $800 million business for each of these companies. So here what happens is you cannot plan something beforehand. You go to a tender, you participate in a global fund tender, you participate in XYZ tender. So the marketing keeps telling us that I'm not going to punch in neither a MTO nor a MTS. They get it, we win the tender, and then the rush starts to serve that tender within 60 days or 90 days, whatever time they negotiate. And this is where the OTIFs also of most of the pharma companies is, you know, you achieve 80-85%, you have done a great job as far as this is concerned. Then there is the typical US generic market. There we use different set of demand and planning processes. So I was just thinking that while, you know, Vickram gave a very good concept, I request my panelists also to share, I think if they agree, maybe we need to look at what kind of demand and supply planning options or tools we need to have for these three different scenarios. I think all the Indian companies, 80% or 90% of them are into these three major businesses. I will solicit my other colleagues what they have to say on this.
Okay.
Rakesh, if I may structure my thoughts.
That's one perspective. I just wanted to put it forward.
Yeah, Ajay, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd like to just structure my thoughts around some of the points that, you know, the other panelists have spoken about. They're extremely relevant. To start off with what Anchal mentioned, the end-to-end visibility, and I fully I'm fully aligned with what he mentioned. My process, the way I think this whole thing is, I'd like to call it a DISC, D-I-S-C, DISC, starting with demand and going on to the inventory, supply, and capacity. This is the most favorite term that I generally have whenever I have structured my thought processes across organizations, across industries, and this is what is the whole supply chain is all about. Getting a visibility from end of demand to the end of capacity is what exactly is what I think Anchal wanted to say. If I know what the demand is in one snapshot, if I know where the inventory is lying, how much inventory my supplier is having, how much inventory my warehouse is having, how much raw material, packing material, excipients, API, finished goods, that visibility. How much is my supplier having, as in what's the material planning capacities that he have, when does he take the campaign, when will he be able to supply. Accordingly, I need to procure the quantities and make my lot sizes. What's my capacity, as in when can I take the campaigns, and making a trade-off between the shelf life of the product and the capacity and the campaign that I am taking is all what the whole supply chain visibility is all about. And as supply chain professionals, no matter what complexity that we are all facing, externally or internally, we have to make it simple. And that's a very, very nice word that Anchal has used. Making it simple means that we have to have complete clarity on each of these variables, each of these elements of supply chain. Whereas we've used tools like algorithms, machine learning, regression models, and to be honest, these are some things which many supply chain professionals still do not really use them or don't understand them. If you ask a demand planner, would you like to have a demand sensing approach by having a demand given to you by the market, or do you want to actually extrapolate it using certain AI tools like an RStudio or on a Python and make a demand plan? You would go, okay, this is much easier to get the demand directly from the market, and I'll use that as my demand plan for making my supply plans. And 80% supply planners do that. But what exactly it requires when it comes to demand planning is what I call as consensus planning, which is a combination of demand sensing from the market and then superimposing it with something which we can statistically come up with. A lot of industries do that, to be honest, and it is because a human tendency. Now out here, of course, when we are talking about certain demands, when we are talking about make to order products, obviously there is no demand consensus required here. It's a complete demand sensing. But when it comes to make to stock products, these are the algorithms which help us, giving us better clarity as to what exactly the demand will foresee in the coming times. Because it makes a machine learning model will make it simple for a supply chain or a demand planner to understand what a human forecast will not be able to do that. So that's about demand. I'll come to the inventory piece later, but I'll cover the supply and capacity piece first. Reason being, inventory is a factor of both demand variability and supplier reliability. When it comes to supplier reliability, one question that Rakesh you asked, why is it that FMCG inventory levels are much lower than what we have in pharmaceutical? It's and I fully agree with Srini. I think the way the structure of the whole industry is very different. If I may add one more point to what Srini said, it's about how the inventory levels are made according to the campaign sizes of the regulated suppliers that we have. Out there in FMCG, we don't have regulations from a supplier standpoint. Out here, we have an API supplier which is regulated, and I'm supposed to buy that only from that particular supplier, and hence I am dependent as a manufacturer of the finished goods on when the campaign of that API will be taken. And that makes my inventory visibility. If I know that he's going to take a campaign only once a quarter, I need to have an inventory levels of at least a quarter, if not more. I don't see that in a FMCG industry happening. I have to depend on the campaigns of my suppliers. And that's where I said inventory is a factor of supplier. At the same time, I also need to ensure that I maintain my inventory basis the demand variability. Like what we saw in the last few months, the variation in demand has been significantly high. And that's the reason why I have to maintain that much inventory all the more so that I can suffice to the demand which comes in a variation. And I'm able to meet the market demand without having sales loss. So it's a function of demand and it's a function of supply. The capacity is another piece which we all today look into. Now, many of the products in pharmaceutical industry are not suit manufactured. They are train manufactured, right? I mean, what we are today doing is we are making multiple batches of various different molecules on the same machine line. It doesn't happen in FMCG. Most FMCG product, at least most, I would say, it does of course happen in FMCG, but then most FMCG products would have a suit manufacturing. It's a machine line operation. And that dedication helps them to reduce the inventory. Out here, we can't. Out here, we have to make a balance between our supplier campaigns. I have to make a balance between my capacity campaigns. I have to make a balance between the demand variability and then come to the inventory levels. Now, all of this can only be made simple if everything is available in one snapshot, like what Anchal said, in a simple frame. And as a human being, to make a decision on each of the variables, I need that simplicity, no matter what the complexity in the background may be happening. That's the role of SNOP. That's the role of an integrated business planning, what Vickram was also saying. If the whole aspect of supply chain is not limited to just one factor, and we can't bifurcate it today. This is why DISC as a whole becomes the most important prerogative from an SNOP standpoint. I'd like to add one more point, which is the last point from a DISC angle. I mean, this DISC has to be added with one more letter, which is L, and I define it as logistics. Again, if at all of this happens and I don't have the logistics visibility, be it my inbound or be it the outbound, I may not be able to take the right calls, may not be able to make the right decisions. Hence, the visibility from end to end, using whatever form of digitization that you can think of, has to happen. And that is what will make our supply chains simpler. I'd like to leave one more point, which is, I think, probably futuristic in nature, very futuristic, which I am very passionate about that, to be honest. And maybe that's the next level of digitization. And that's just a food for thought for our panelists and to the audience. It's blockchain. It's something which I have been reading about in the last 2 years more so. I'm not an expert, I can say still, because it requires too much of in-depth. It may seem as a very complicated tool, if I may say, but it has a phenomenal use case when it comes to pharmaceutical. There are very few industries that have been classified as excellent use cases in blockchain, and pharmaceutical industry is one of them. I don't know who's going to take the lead in the industry to use this, but let me just give a very small food for thought for everybody. It's with regards to this. If at all, we have as we know, the intent to have the visibility or the traceability of API, or for that matter, excipient batches, right up to the supplier level, and going down to the consumer, end consumer, or at the pharmacy. We today, have very limited visibility. I know most of us we are doing serializations, but that serialization is dependent on each and every manufacturer at every step. What if a blockchain comes in and it gives us that inherent ledger, which is completely driven by the market, completely hack-proof, and completely visible to all the stakeholders in the supply chain? It's a phenomenal use case that can come out with regards to blockchain. It will reduce the cost drastically. It will make the inventory visibility right up to the what Vickram was saying. We today don't have the visibility of right at the point of sale. That visibility of point of sale will be available to manufacturers, the suppliers of our raw materials, and the intelligence of information would go into a next spherical game altogether. So those are some game changers which I think exist. Again, to classify the whole system.
Come back to you regarding, I know this is a very passionate topic of digital acceleration, which comes up in a big way. Yes, Srinivas, what are your views on the critical element of demand sensing? Because all said and done, the right and the most simplest information is our ability to understand the external demand first. And whether it is blockchain or any computational logic, it needs this particular kind of data. So how do we really sense this in supply chain? I've been perplexed by supply chain, even the global supply chain between the Hyderabad airport and the belly of a airport. There's no visibility. There's no data that nobody knows at what temperature are we moving to. Or when you go to a rural India, you see a pharmacy which operates at 51 degrees centigrade with all your chemical composition exposed to the temperature, getting in different complications. So I think we need a large amount of supply chain infrastructure too. That is important. But I think the very first element of understanding and sensing that number information, what let me quote Anchal again, the simplest and the right information that we should get from everybody is an important element of this thing. So what are your views on that, Sreenivas?
Yeah, so very honestly, this is one of the most complex topic. And as one of the panelists, I don't remember who mentioned it, that perhaps the best work, the best job is being done right now by the e-commerce fellows. Yeah, they're also trying to kind of use algorithms. Amazon, for example, uh, not just based on the past data, but based on the current data of how many clicks have happened for a particular thing, how many searches have happened, and what is the kind of movement which people are doing. And it's also catching a variety of crowdsourcing of data from various people to be able to kind of sense that particular demand and project it into the future. And for that projected demand, it is actually saying that we will start moving our goods in bulk rather than moving our goods in eaches from one location to another. Now, when it comes to the pharmaceutical supply chains, to be honest, we are at a very primitive stage. I would say that we are in the Stone Age era, as far as if you were to compare ourselves with the various other industries. Yeah. I think if I remember, Vickram said that US is a pretty much a stable kind of a demand because and the demand does not vary. There are various customers. There are three big customers in the US who actually account for 90% of the market. Now, three customers, 90% of the market, take their demand, plug it in, get moving. That's not real demand sensing. Yeah, that's at a very bulk and a large level, as Anchal was saying. We need to go to the individual pharmacy levels. If we are talking to a GPO, which is a group purchasing organization, that's an aggregation of a demand. And there, while one can always say that the aggregation of demand, there will be errors on the positive side and the negative side, and therefore it helps us when you go into large GPOs, large distributors, etc., etc. But demand sensing per se, I don't think we do that in general for pharmaceuticals, with the exception of two far ends. When I say far ends, the first place where there is demand sensing which happens is in the OTC, over the counter, where at the pharmacy level in the US, actually, the store pickups where the customers and consumers are picking up. And the second place where it happens is the branded, products which are administered by the healthcare professionals, which means the injectables, typically the very high-priced items, are those items where there is a demand sensing happening in the so-called Puritan sense of the term. Because when you're trying to collate that demand from each and every individual healthcare professional, that person is actually writing so many prescriptions, and therefore there is so much of demand which is getting generated from individual demand note. Yeah. So these are the two far end products where there is some level of demand sensing which is happening in the pharma industry, but the large bit of the generics world does not use any demand sensing tools, in my personal opinion, in the pharma industry. And that's the large market for us. You know, I am amazed. I was amazed when I moved into the pharma industry that we are the pharmaceutical factory. India is a pharmaceutical factory for the world, and we generate about 30 to 40% of the doses of the pills in the world. But at the end of the day, all those doses and pills are actually sold in bulk to a customer who is actually such a large customer. So imagine, the whole of the US market, 90% of the market is actually managed by 3 large customers. So all the positives and the negative demand variations are actually getting aggregated at a particular level, unless until you're going and actually doing a huge contracting with a new customer. Now, that of course is pretty simple. Yeah. So that's my view on demand sensing in pharma. Are we doing it in the Western world? No. In the Indian context, definitely not. Is there a scope for us to actually do something? Definitely yes. There is a lot of scope, because that kind of a data will not just help in terms of the supply chain, but it will also help in terms of patient, and the doctors, and ability to service them, and creating some, aggregated level data at a pin code for generating, some statistics which might actually mean, for example, if in Chennai there are people who are getting prescribed with iodine pills, for example. I'm just throwing a case in point for the sake of illustration. Then that data can actually get used by, for larger purpose with the governments and everybody, saying that if there is something wrong with the water in that particular area and those pin codes and blah, 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 for doing large scale corrections also. So in my personal opinion, there is a huge opportunity sitting right there for us to tap. Have we done it? Definitely not.
All right, thank you. I think that's an amazing perspective and deep diving into the whole problem of demand sensing. But I'll go back to Anchal. Anchal, you made a very significant fourth point, or the third point you said was what if analysis. Can you throw a little more light on what if analysis? Because it seems even during pandemic, everybody was doing what if. They were in their war rooms, meeting every day, unlike earlier days when they never met with each other. They congregated, they decided which market, whether it's Chennai or whether it is Bangalore or whether it is Pune or whether it is Delhi. Where does the actual demand really emerges and how the incidence of disease is changing. So what kind of what if analysis are you having in mind in order to help demand sensing becomes, or demand planning becomes much better instruments in more disruptive times and in times to come?
So, Dr. Singh, what if is something which, as supply chain professionals, all of us started doing on Excel? As simple as that,
Yes.
right? This is what is my sheet A. That is my one scenario. Sheet B is my second scenario. And I've seen, supply chain. I've been in planning space for more than 16 years as a customer, as a consultant, and I've, in all of these enterprise solutions, I remember many times being amazed by what Excel can do. But the challenge is the input is static. It is limited to what you updated at a certain point of time. And by the time this analysis does, in real life, the situation is changing. So the challenge is then for us as a technology company, how do you look at this situation where people are trying to do what if analysis? Now, rather than spending time pulling data into Excel, in IBP, what we do is you have this integrated unified environment where you have all the inputs from ERP, from different sources collated into one application, and with a click of button you are creating a snapshot. So it's not a job you are running, it's not something you have to tell IT to do. This is something as a business user you are creating a snapshot and making the changes. Now, one of the challenges with any advanced planning application is it can help you with advanced algorithm, but there is a lot of effort in trying to run it. right? And when we don't understand parameters, when we don't understand, even with machine learning, the adoption will define. But unless as a planner I understand the logic, I'm not going to go with it. I would rather go with my static Excel. So in this environment, it's better if we can connect the enterprise together with our supply chain partners, create a view, and this is a live view as near as it can to the real life. So it's like a digital twin. You have created it, this model, copy it, and now you're running different scenarios, sharing it with your team in the system. Now, one of the more comments from one of the IBP customers was, see, systems are one thing. How we use it, how the organization adopts to it is very interesting. This customer said that he said we stopped. We told our planners, stop using phone, stop using email, stop using communicating to me that there is an additional volume here and there. Tell me in the system, that is one source of truth, and I don't want it crazy where I have to remember what came in email, what came in phone. So it is a matter of how we gather all this data, put it in one model, and then create a simple what if that business is in control. Not that they have to call, create a ticket, and do different things. And the interesting part here is, see, we all use applications, we all have our own opinion. Personally, what I really like as a simple feature is demand or our suppliers, they cannot use too many systems. You cannot expect them to give system in one of this update, and by the way, also give me update here and also give me update in a third system. What we want is simply, if in our integrated business planning, we give them access through web, a planning web application. They can open it on a browser, they can open it on a tablet, and just provide the input as simple as that. This is your key figure at this level. Just give me what numbers you are seeing, confirm it to me, and that enters my own sales and operation planning. So when we talk of what if planning, Dr. Singh, this what if planning, one is with a click of button, I'm creating a snapshot and being able to do the logic, being able to add additional capacity. My certain plant production line is down. What if I remove it, but I increase the volume with the contract manufacturer? What the overall profitability looks like? What does my OTIF look like? So all those snapshots you're doing in system, and the exciting part is this is live. This is where you have gathered all the input from your supply chain partners, and in one system you're working. So it's a simple point. I can stress it enough that when there are multiple systems, I've been in situation where we were doing analysis, like something went wrong in planning, and you go back, okay, it came from this system. You check there, oh no, it came from the other system. You check there, and by the time you reach the root cause, that person is asking, when did you start using our system? Our data. I never knew that planning function is using it. So for an enterprise, when the architecture is complex, to a limit it's a reality of life. And then this tracing and fixing root cause becomes very complicated. So that's where, as myself as a supply chain professional, I feel very positive that the way technology is evolving, the way technology is changing, it is forcing to think simple. It's forcing to think how we can, it's in both dimensions. You need the powerful algorithms, you need machine learning, you need intelligence where humans find it difficult. Something like I said, parameters, too hard to know. If I want to calculate supply chain, how do I put variabilities? What is, lead time variabilities? We are looking at how we can leverage machine learning in defining them. On the other hand, we are making it simple, like Excel front end, a web front end, a web front end or a portal that you can share with your supply chain network, and they provide their inputs. So this is where the data gathering and the people part becomes simple, and then you leverage the algorithms or the advanced tools. So in the end, to summarize, what I want to say is one of the favorite features, and which we hear a lot about from customers, is having an Excel front end, creating scenarios, and being able to create dashboards out of the system. So rather than multiple version, having a unified system, everybody uses it. Sales uses it, production uses it, management team can have a review based on what is the best possible data and what is your proposal. So when we go to management for in this situation, this is what we are doing. It is not based on of course experience is there, but it is based on that I have run the numbers. This is what the both scenarios shape up to be and what we are going to do. So this is where I am glad that technology is moving in a direction where we are looking at leveraging machine learning. We are looking at how we improve algorithms. At the same time, how do we remember that it needs to help business take decisions? It needs to be simple enough for people to understand what's happening, easy to provide input. Something like sales colleagues, they don't want, you know, having to go to application, having to run training programs, and then people change roles, somebody new comes in, have no idea, you know, it becomes challenging. And I'm glad to know that business applications are taking a direction, maintaining the power of it, but at the same time making it easier to adopt, easier to use.
I think, Anchal, that's very well put up. I was doing a training I won't name the company, just 2 years back. It's one of the top FMCG company. I was training there 37 demand planners from throughout the country. It was an India-centric this thing. So I asked them, what is the algorithm that goes into your APS system? And everybody just smiled. Nobody answered anything. Everybody just smiled. I think that's a fair point, you know, that we need to know the APS system. We just can't depend on what is coming out of it unless we know this. To put a little bit of closer to the demand sensing this thing, I think you have put a lot of issues into it. But I would say that there are two elements to demand sensing. One is forecast, and forecast necessarily need not be deterministic. It can be probabilistic. So you move from a single forecast number to a range of forecasts, and range of forecasts would give you the idea of a what if planning in a much better way. And you get that long tail also of your product, as it would help pharma industries to look at it better. That's the first basic inputs that you can use it in your demand sensing. The second comes from the trade, as Anchal said, or Ajay was also talking about. And that is something which we need to be very careful. Sales data and order data has all the loading of psychology and biases of the people that create bullwhip. We need to be able to correct that. How do we correct? Why is the data correct? And hence we need to have visibility to his data system. And I think that visibility is important. Second thing is that, is it because of any promotions, any discounts, any logistics, the truckload discount? I don't know, whatever it is, you can understand this. Is this driven by the businesses? And is this the variability created by business practices? And I think if you can understand this, you get and then use the forecast and this and combine and get a demand sensing. I think this is called as demand planning variability, which will be much, much lower than the order variability, which comes from the sales, which comes from the channel. And I think there are a large number of people who are using these approaches in the SNOP and largely in the IBP framework, which is really helping us to lower your demand plan variability vis-a-vis your sales order variability, as you have a very, very challenging DDMRP supply side synchronization models that are claiming to be based only on orders and correct. But I think they have used sales variability. The only thing they have done is the physical of the digital twin, where they have really created what you call as inventory deployment system, where they have broken the system into multiple parts, reducing the long lead time into manageable lead time. And that's the beauty of that model, which can be easily used in any APS system and moving forward. The question which comes to my mind after listening to Anchal is that, what are the expectations of businesses going further in terms from APS and technology in order to solve their supply chain problems? Because everybody is looking at digital technology, everybody is looking at better systems. If you see the researchers that are coming out, they say that those who are digitally inclined, as Ajay was rightly saying, have performed much better than those who were reluctant to go digital or to use technology. So what are the expectations and what are the direction and investment that would happen in pharma industry in future in order to bring this resilience? Because visibility is the best resilience to pharma planning and pharma supply chain. So what are these key element of technology that you people are thinking of bringing into and making it more resilient, visible, agile, and granular also, as you deal with so much distribution channel where granularity becomes more important? So we'll start with Vickram. If you can take this question.
Sure, Dr. Singh. I mean, first, I mean, yeah, I mean, going digital is going to be the way of life. You know, I mean, there's I don't think so. 5 years from now, anybody will have an option to say, I don't want to go digital. It's like, how smartphones were probably in 2008-9. People were still thinking, what's the way forward? But today, that's the way of life. So being digital is going to be the way of life for all businesses, be pharma or any other industry. But what I want to call out over here loud and clear is I want to break this up into two parts and divided by a very thin line, digitization and digital transformation. So, I want to differentiate both these, aspects. Probably there's a thin line differentiating them, So digitization is one part of it, where my existing business processes, I digitize it so that there's uniform visibility across the supply chain. Everybody speaks and talks the same truth and looks at the same number, But in my mind, the way pharma industry and the way supply chain in pharma is right now, we also need a lot of digital transformation. You talked about the inventory numbers, you talked about the cash to cash cycle, we discussed so much in detail about demand sensing. So there's a eminent need to digitally transform the way we do planning, the way we do manage our supply chains, but the way we manage our entire businesses. Ajay mentioned about blockchain. I mean, that's in my mind, it's not just digitizing things around how we operate right now. That's talking about a transformation of how we do business, how we change our processes, how we look at how we can simplify the process. So my expectation from this entire event is very clear. I want to break it up into two parts. Digitization is something that we need to go, and that's going to be true. But more importantly, what kind of tools and applications are there to simplify my efforts and work, which actually translates into business improvement, dependence on people, moving more from people to processes, and that is where the real transformation is going to come from. That's my quick takeaway, Doctor.
All right, Ajay, you did talk about all these things. Let me get back to a very sensitive topic in digital acceleration itself. I saw you moving till the factory capacity, briefly mentioning the supplies, but not going more into the visibility of the supplies and procurements. Because if you really see, the major disruption, I was looking at some data today, was on the supply side disruptions. And what we have actually seen is that 51% of them is material shortage disruption that has happened. How do you tackle such problems even during normal times and during pandemics or during any natural disasters or any event that disrupts business activities? And how do you build this business continuity program? Because visibility to the first tier supplier is good enough, but not very good enough.
Yeah, so when you're saying about visibility of supplier, this is primarily from the material planning perspective you're talking about, right? The raw material, packing material, excipients, API, right? So I believe there are two aspects to this. The first one is getting visibility of the current and committed quantities by the supplier, which is basically from the perspective of how we are related, their systems are related to ours. Anchal did mention, if there can be as simple as a portal or an API integration, or even simpler than that, going in, a decade earlier, something like as simple as FTP. Those simple technologies exist, wherein the supplier simply maintains an Excel sheet, puts it on like spreadsheet, what we just discussed, the simplest form, and every demand supply planner is using that today. That's his bread and butter. He maintains an Excel sheet, put it on an FTP server, it gets integrated through FTP into our systems, and we get the visibility. It's as simple as that. These do not cost a penny. They are the most simplest form of integrations. And we can do it with n number of suppliers. There is absolutely no hardware, software requirement. We do it without any hitch from the supplier as well. He can classify the data that he wants to share with us. He can maintain it in the form that he wants to share with us. Those are some simple technologically available choices that we all have today. We've not made use much of it, but we need to. That's does not require much investment. The second is with regards to regularity of supplies, which I was mentioning about the campaigns, how our inventories are so much dependent upon the size of the campaign, the quantity committed. These are typically a lot of times what I've seen is on ad hoc basis. We need to come into some form of a smart contract systems. These smart contracts, again, there are we need to have a much, when it comes to medium to longer term visibility. These smart contracts can assure us what kind of visibility in the medium to short term can the supplier guarantee us. Vickram was mentioning about how the supply chain in the US works. Most of the contracts are having a year visibility, and there are penalties around it. There are certain smart contracts which they are using by using the bids and auctions. These kind of simple formats of contracts can be put to use even in India. They exist outside India, but they don't necessarily exist in India. These are some of the newer age, I talked about blockchain also. Blockchain is nothing but a smart contract, which maintains a ledger around it. It's something which, even if we don't look at blockchains, we are looking at simple smart contracts which can be legally bound. We make use of it, and then a simple purchase order as per the procurement cycle can be placed, and we get the materials. These are the two aspects which I can say which can be used for both short term and medium term.
Blockchain is a backbone for such integration. That's the simplest way to put it, and that can bring your overall integration. Anchal, what are your views on this kind of supply visibility from your perspective?
It's like I said earlier, Dr. Singh, it's the visibility that how how close we are to what is happening, whether it is in relation to disruptions at supplier, whether it is related to a certain plant being down, whether it is on the demand side. So how close we can get, how easy we can make it for people to provide those inputs, and then processing. Yes, we can leverage the best technology, we can leverage the best algorithms to do the math for us, that is supply demand matching, and being able to do it often. So those are the points I would want to mention. Like I said earlier, for our sales and operation planning in an organization is as good as the best information we can get from our partners, the supply chain. So it's the whole network. If we can get that information and use algorithms to process information, we have a better chance at responding often. So if this takes time, if this is error prone, yes, it by the time you're doing it, situation has changed and you're kind of lagging. But how do we make it near real time? How do we make it fast enough? Process it fast, because we can't wait for, you say, a couple of hours for a calculation to finish. How can we make it quick? Take the inputs, processes fast. This is the action plan, and as a planner, as a supply chain leader, I should trust it. I understand what it is doing, I trust it, I have the buy-in, and then execute on it. So supply chain, not just SNOP, but SNOE, that is execute it along with the best available information.
All right, I think Vickram, you did talk about SNOP and SNOE, and we are running out of time. So let me put some thought and give a close to this non-ending, discussion because of technology. I think it's very interesting to see a lot of simple stuff, but very elegant in terms of supply chain planning, and very difficult to create and implement stuff has been talked about here. And as we see the whole evolution of digitalization of supply chain, or digitization of supply chain, or digital acceleration, one thing that really seems to be very clear is that the supply chain planning will take up a very strong element of providing visibility end to end, from the demand side till the supply side and whichever industry you are, your last tire of your supplier needs to be visible. Because if you look at visibility, one of the famous writers on visibility, David Levy, when he wrote on Ford during the tsunami in Japan, he said that there was a 13th supplier tire which only contributed 0.2% to the total supply, disrupted the Ford Motors production for almost 2.5 weeks. So I think you need to have amazing visibility, whoever is your supplier, whatever level of tires of it is. And you need to have a huge visibility to the last miles of your pharmaceutical pharmacy in India. If India can have digital India, businesses can have digital business India and can see everything visible anywhere. And a control tower approach in real time would really help, because we have blockchains coming up in a big way. You have Internet of the Things. So you have sensor everywhere, automation everywhere, and all these are providing one basic input. And I think this is where I would say that machine language and big data will play a big role, because big data is a little different than the statistics. Statistics is built upon a hypothesis to be tested, whereas big data can sense the data, create hypotheses and test. And I think this computational logic can provide a lot of aberrations that happen because of business variability that can be taken care in your demand and supply sensing, and you can have a real-time effect in planning. And I think cloud-based systems, what Anchal is talking about in real time, can play a big role in providing this visibility. And if you have visibility, you know the pain areas, you know the need for efficiency, granularity, and agility. You can always, whatever be your regulatory and non-regulatory supply chain, you can design your lead times, your sourcing timings, and your overall matching of demand and supply in a much better way, depending on the visibility that it brings in a more what if this thing. The one element that really needs to be looked at is that we should also move away from what if to scenario planning. And I think, as most businesses are doing today, is that how is the incidence of this disease going to affect businesses, or how are the macroeconomy or recession going to affect businesses in the long run? And all these scenario planning also would be a larger what if planning in order to see that planning can help. And if planning tools can provide this kind of ability to compute and ability to induce data and reduce them to some kind of dashboard, as Anchal was saying, in terms of visibility, then and that visualization can be a great source of understanding, and each and everyone sees the same in schedule, whether it's your partner or whether it's your partner on the demand side or partner on the supply chain. If they all see the same schedule, a lot of problems can be solved, because there is a visibility, there is no game playing. And obviously, yes, there is an organizational side of the physical, and the human and the people side of transformation should take place. Like in an IBP process, there should be learning and relearning and planning and replanning based on the events that happen. That can be because of what if or scenario planning. So I thank all my panelists, Vickram, Ajay, Anchal, Sreenivas, and Riju, for giving their valuable time and contributing to this particular debate. Thank you very much.